Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto is taken out of Konoha by Itachi at the age of 10 part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto groaned. It was his third term in the academy. Third term. He'd failed the graduation exam twice already. Damn the Bunshin no Jutsu, he just couldn't get it to work. And to top it off, this term he was in class with the two girls he'd had crushes on since he was 5, and had fallen in love with when he was 9. And they were both crushing on that arrogant, brooding Uchiha bastard, Sasuke. Now, Naruto was making his way home, annoyed by the condition his life was falling into. He just couldn't get the help he needed. He didn't want to bother Iruka-sensei too much, what with all the other students in the class, and the Hokage was too busy to help him, leaving Naruto with subpar taijutsu, no genjutsu to speak of, and horrible ninjutsu. Damn it, why did everybody hate him? Shaking his head slightly in despair, Naruto opened the door of his shabby apartment and froze. There, in his home, were two figures he didn't recognize. They were the same height, both seemed to be looking at him, but it was hard to tell. They were wearing high-collared black cloaks with red clouds on them, and straw hats that further concealed their faces. Prominently displayed were two rings, one marked, Shu, worn by the figure on the left, on his right ring finger, the other marked, Nan, worn by the figure on the right, on her, or at least, Naruto assumed it was female judging by the delicate hand, left ring finger. This is him, said the male. Yes, replied the female, her voice confirming Naruto's suspicion. He's grown. He's still young and it's been 2 years. Of course he's grown. Uzumaki Naruto, he said calmly. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Uchiha Itachi, and my companion is Kazuki Kamai. We are here to take you away from this village for a time, and when you come back, it will be with the knowledge and power to gain all that you desire. Hey, Itachi, do you really have to make this sound like a deal with the devil? Because seriously, unless you made some kind of deal with that masked asshole behind my back, this really shouldn't sound like a deal with the devil. Shut up, growled Itachi. Naruto continued to stare, too shocked and confused to move, or even to put 2 and 2 together and recognize Itachi's clan name. Itachi refocused on Naruto. Perhaps I should rephrase, he said. You have 2 choices. You can remain here, trapped in your current place without aid and we will walk away. Or, you can come with us for a time, and we will show you what it means to be Hokage. Though there are times I wonder, being Hokage to be acknowledged as a bit too selfish to really be worthy of being Hokage, don't you think? This was your idea, but now it's time to shut up and let me handle things. Naruto finally moved. Is she always like this? He asked, pointing at Mai. Itachi sighed. Usually. Okay. Naruto nodded. He thought back over everything that had happened in his life, and came to a decision. I'll go with you. Hokage-sama. Uzumaki Naruto has disappeared. What? Shouted Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage. When? How? We don't know, sir. Beneath her straw hat, the sole female of the trio walking down the path away from Konoha smiled slightly, having just received the memories of one of the shadow clones she'd left behind to observe the village. Hey, it seems like we've caused quite a stir, she commented cheerfully. But maybe Hokage-sama would have liked to know, should we have told Hokage-sama? I think we should have told Hokage-sama. Do you think we should have told Hokage-sama? Itachi pointedly ignored her, causing Mai to pout. You're no fun at all, she said. I know life hasn't been all sunshine and roses, but I still want my cheerful teammate back. Stop brooding. What would Shisui-ni-sama think of this? Naruto stared at her in confusion as he followed them. Itachi was so used to this that he simply continued to ignore her. So go figure this would be one of those occasions where she had a short fuse. Mai struck faster than Naruto could blink and Itachi could act. She knocked away his straw hat and stared straight into his blood-red Sharingan eyes with her own, even as the Mitsutomo of her Sharingan twisted and fused into an interwoven star. Tsukuyomi, she intoned before he could react. Itachi now found himself strapped to a cross, his eyes widening in horror, the world around him red with a blood moon in the sky, himself and his companion in bizarre negative colors. Now, Itachi, said Mai. The torture begins. For the next 72 hours, he suddenly realized that there were a lot more of him around, and a whole lot more of her. And every one of her held a stick with a feather attached to the end. Up on a hill, boxes of Pocky were stacked, with additional copies of his companion going through the seals for a Kaden Jutsu at a painfully slow pace. You will be forced to watch your precious Pocky burn, while being constantly tickled with all of these feathers. There was a truly frightening sadistic gleam in her eyes. After what felt like an eternity, all the Pocky was consumed by the flames and the torture momentarily stopped as everything was reset. 71 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds left, came the taunting voice. Well, that was fun, she said as her companion collapsed to the ground, shaking his head to try and clear it of the insane images she'd shown to him. She smiled. Now then, Uchiha Itachi, are you ready to lighten up? Standing up, Itachi retrieved his straw hat and put it back on. Where are the therapists? He muttered. Mai giggled. Didn't you hear? They're looking for more therapists. I made a mistake, didn't I? Said Naruto, looking to Itachi. Every day, I think that of allowing her to follow me, said Itachi dryly. And yet, I am constantly reminded that it would have been more foolish to try and stop her. You're damn right it would have been foolish to try and stop me. All the legions of hell couldn't do more than inconvenience me. I am a goddess given flesh and nothing can stop me. She'll get better, said Itachi reassuringly. Incurably insane or not, she can at least feign sanity well enough for others. Naruto wasn't so sure of that. It had been a month since they'd left Konoha. About 2 weeks in, Mai had started to act more seriously, and Naruto finally felt like he'd get out of this with his sanity intact. Now, they were ready to begin Naruto's training. Alright, Naruto-kun, said Mai. It was amazing how much more mature she sounded now. We're not going to teach you much that you wouldn't learn in the academy, just some clone techniques, since those are your weakness. Don't worry, these will be easier to use than the standard Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto nodded attentively, while Mai walked over to a nearby pond. First, let me introduce you to the most important of all Bunshin Jutsus, said Mai. Now, I can actually perform any clone technique without hand seals, and when we're finished with you, every jutsu you know will be possible without hand seals. But first, Mai formed a cross with her hands. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, intoned Mai. Another Mai suddenly appeared, without even a puff of smoke, an indication of absolute chakra control. The shadow clone technique uses more chakra than the standard clone technique. However, the clones are solid, making it much more useful than the standard technique. Not only that, but anything your clones learn is sent back to you when they're dispelled, meaning that with one clone, you could get 2 days of experience in one, or with 1,000 clones, you could get 20 years of experience in a week. Naruto's response was to sputter in shock. Yes, you can see how this would speed your training, don't you? She said. Anyways, next is the Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu, a water clone of Mai formed from the pond. The Doden Kage Bunshin, this time, a clone formed from mud. And my personal favorite, the Futon Kage Bunshin, this time, wind seemed to gather before another clone of Mai formed, indistinguishable from the rest. 2 of the clones walked away, and then one clone stabbed another. The stabbed clone suddenly exploded into wind, apparently cutting wind, as the other clone was cut apart, falling into mud. Mai pulled a ninjutsu out from seemingly nowhere and cut down another clone, revealing it to be the water clone. The shadow clone walked away from Naruto, Mai, and Itachi. And this, Naruto-kun, said Itachi. as a technique I created and taught to Mai, Bunshin Daibakua. No sooner had the words left Itachi's lips than the clone exploded like a bomb. Naruto's eyes widened and Mai smiled. These are the techniques we will be teaching you, she said. It will not be all about learning to fight, said Itachi. You will be studying history and academia. You will be practicing chakra control exercises that will allow you to walk up walls, stick to ceilings, and treat water like solid ground. There will be some fun and games though, said Mai. Those have a purpose too. We will be promoting agility, stealth, dexterity and intelligence. You'll have to deal with puzzles to challenge and sharpen the mind. You have a lot to live up to if you wish to be Hokage, and it won't be easy, even if you can cheat your way up. But in the end, it will be worth it. Itachi smiled at Naruto. Are you ready, Naruto-kun? Yes, said Naruto. Come on, let's get started. It had been close to 2 years since Uzumaki Naruto disappeared, and a few people were still reeling from the effects of it. Moods had ranged from desperate to terrified to hopeful or overjoyed. The longer he was gone, the more people shifted towards apathy, other than a distinct lack of annoying, over-the-top pranks performed by a loud-mouthed orange-wearing blonde lunatic. Things weren't that different. For some, though, the concern never went away. They continued to wonder at what had become of Naruto. Had he been killed? Had he run away to an enemy village? To live as a civilian, after failing to graduate from the academy so many times? And a few beat themselves up over it, angry with themselves for allowing all that had happened to Naruto. This was the village approached by a young boy via the main road into Konoha. It wasn't all that different from how he remembered it, and he wondered how people would react to his return. The boy's face, clothes, and hair were completely concealed by the long-necked black cloak and straw hat he wore. The cloak itself was decorated with golden nine-tailed foxes, some portrayed as sleeping, some running, some jumping, some sitting stoically, like a guardian, and some of the more chibi ones frolicking about, as though they were fox kits playing together. Perhaps the most important, though, was the large decal on the back of the cloak, which showed a golden fox resting between two other nine-tailed foxes, one a standout pink color, the other a bright, platinum color, all of their tails twined together to create the appearance of 9 large tails of gold, platinum, and pink. The boy stepped up to the guard post outside the gate, where a chunin looked him over. And you are? He asked gruffly. The boy tilted his straw hat up a bit to reveal some of the details of his face, his sapphire cerulean blue eyes, whisker-marked cheeks, and spiky golden hair. The guard's eyes widened. Uzumaki Naruto, he said warmly. Wah, but, when, how, huh? Naruto didn't even blink. Welcome home, said the chunin after taking a moment to recompose himself. Have to say, never expected to see you again, kind of nice though, things have been quiet without you around. Is it really that awkward? Kinda. Nice getup, by the way. Anyways, you should probably go see Hokage-sama. He's been really worried about you. Yeah, I plan to. Thanks. I've been worried about how people would react, so best to see him immediately. Probably. You disappear for 2 years, then show up like this, the chunin shook his head. Unbelievable. Believe it, said Naruto. Because it just happened. Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha, engulfed in the early morning mist, his goal the Hokage Tower. He'd kept his hat on, intent on hiding his identity for the moment. He wasn't certain how people would react to the return of the demon, as he vaguely recalled some had taken to calling him. He was mostly afraid that they would try to run him back out of Konoha, meaning seeing Sarutobi was his highest priority. The man was one of the few who acknowledged him, and the only one who could guarantee he wouldn't be forced to flee the village. 2 years under the tutelage of Itachi and Mai had taught him a great deal. Thanks to Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he was pretty much unparalleled in the fields he'd studied, right up to having 80 years of academics stuffed into his head, the most boring part of the whole thing by far in his opinion. By the end of his first year, he was able to maintain several hundred clones for an extended period, so he had, easily, over a century worth of total studies and training under his belt. This was not to say it hadn't repeatedly given him the mother of all headaches, but still, it was well worth it. Combined with his near absolute chakra control and the strategic mind he'd been taught to properly cultivate, he could prove a dangerous foe even for advanced ninja. He'd been taught both Mai and Itachi's preferred taijutsu styles. Mai's was a variant of the Juken, the Moroccan, which targeted an opponent's nerve clusters and pressure points, while Itachi's, Hogo Shishise, was a sit, wait, block, deflect, and counter style, more pacifistic and defensive than Mai's Moroccan. Mai had also instructed him in the arts of controlling his chakra externally, unleashing enormous levels of highly focused chakra at once, and containing large amounts of chakra in a confined space. When he asked what it was all for, she'd merely told him it would be useful to him someday, a fact she knew thanks to a unique ninjutsu of hers, known as Toyotama. When he'd asked about that, she'd refused to give him any details. Naruto was also fast. Without his weights, he could bring himself up to Chunin level speeds in short bursts. With the weights, he could still get to the high end of the genin spectrum in short bursts. His perfection of the taijutsu styles he'd been taught meant that, in a pure taijutsu spar without his weights, Naruto could beat Itachi every 1 in 5 or so spars. However, that was actually just holding off Itachi enough to wear his big brother out, as Itachi had a rather fragile body. Lack of that was one of Mai's key strengths over Itachi, though her far more questionable sanity likely mitigated that advantage. Naruto shook his head. That wasn't his concern at the moment. Looking up, he realized that he was in front of the Hokage Tower, and proceeded to enter the building. He walked up several flights of stairs before arriving before the Hokage's secretary. She looked across her desk at him inquisitively. "Excuse me, but may I see the Hokage?" he said politely. "I know I don't have an appointment, but, well, it's been a while, and I'm sure he'd be happy to see me." The secretary, Kureki, was silent for a moment. That voice was familiar, then her eyes widened as she recognized it. She squinted slightly, trying to see his face, there. The familiar whisker marks that she hadn't seen in 2 years. Kureki smiled. "Of course, Naruto-kun," she said. Naruto was surprised she recognized him, but didn't mind. Kureki had always been kind to him. He pushed his hat up a bit and lifted his head to give her a warm smile of gratitude. "Arigato," he said, stepping past her into the door of the Hokage's office. He lifted a hand and knocked gently. The Hokage sighed. He was losing. Again. He just never could quite seem to beat the monstrous foe that was paperwork. The bane of the cage, no, of all village leaders. What kind of cold, cruel, evil-hearted person devised this monstrosity? Sarutobi was just beginning to entertain a fantasy that involved all the paperwork in Hai no Kuni and a very big Kaden Jutsu when he heard a knock on the door. "Enter," he said, glad for a distraction from the paperwork. The door opened and in stepped a cloaked figure. Sarutobi studied the figure closely. He was male, that much was obvious to Sarutobi. He was about 5 foot 3 inches tall, but that was all he could really determine, due to the straw hat. The cloak, however, was of particular interest to him. He knew of no one who wore a cloak decorated with golden kyubi no kitsune. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be, young man?" he asked. Sarutobi couldn't be certain, but he thought he could actually feel a smirk forming on the boy's lips. "I'm gone for 2 years and you forget all about me?" he asked, reaching up and removing his straw hat to reveal a whiskered face with deep blue eyes and spiky, golden blonde hair. "I'm hurt, Ojii-san." Sarutobi's eyes widened. "En Naruto?" he asked, standing up. He then lunged forward and wrapped the blonde in a tight hug. "Where have you been these last 2 years?" Naruto smiled as he returned the hug of his grandfather figure. After the two broke apart, Sarutobi returned to his desk and Naruto stood in front of it, smiling. I was taken out of the village for training, he said. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow while Naruto pulled one hand out of the sleeve and into his cloak, where he grabbed a storage scroll before putting the arm back into his sleeve. He held the scroll out. My Nekken told me to give this to you. Sarutobi's eyes widened. My, he said. Do you mean Kazekika Mai? He asked. Naruto looked confused and nodded. Uncertainly, Sarutobi reached out the scroll and unrolled it. He pushed chakra into it, activating it and releasing the contents. Out popped two scrolls, a small one the size of the storage scroll, and a large one Sarutobi recognized. The forbidden scroll of sealing that had been stolen 4 years ago, during the chaos of the Uchiha massacre. Setting the forbidden scroll aside in shock, Sarutobi looked at the smaller scroll before looking up at Naruto. Naruto, he said slowly. Was there anyone there? Anyone, besides you and Mai? Naruto nodded. Yeah, he said. Itachi Nissen, he's Sasuke's older brother. Sarutobi's body momentarily locked up before he breathed a slight sigh of relief. All right Naruto, he said. Before we discuss what you learned, I should tell you something about Itachi and Mai. Sarutobi then launched into an explanation of how Naruto's senseis were S-rank Nukenin of Konoha, and were presently considered the two most dangerous shinobi in the Bingo book. Hell, the bounty on Mai's head was close to 500 million ryo, and flee on-site orders had been placed by all the hidden villages regarding the two, a feat only ever matched by the Yellow Flash of Konoha, Namikaze Minato. He proceeded to explain that Itachi wasn't exactly a criminal, but for the sake of protecting the village, he'd willingly allowed himself to be labeled as one. Mai, on the other hand, was a criminal, but also an unknown element. Her known crime was the theft of the forbidden scroll of sealing, the same one that Naruto had just returned for her. More questionable was her exact involvement in the Uchiha massacre. While relieved to know that his metaphorical brother and sister weren't the bad people most apparently believed they were, he was uncertain how to take the knowledge of their involvement in the Uchiha massacre, and was told by Sarutobi to mention none of this to anyone, not even the identity of his teachers. He understood, and promised to keep it a secret, something he'd intended to do anyways at Itachi's request. So, Naruto, continued Sarutobi. Now that that is out of the way, care to tell me what you learned? No doubt something for you to use to turn this village upside down. Naruto grinned ruefully. No, actually, said Naruto. They didn't teach me many jutsu, but they did tell me about the Kyuubi. Sarutobi's eyes widened and Naruto raised a hand, forestalling any questions. They explained it all to me so that I'd understand, and taught me how to pull out the fox's chakra. I can control it up to about 3 taels worth of chakra, but while it makes me stronger, I start running more on instinct than anything else. I tried pulling out the 4th tael, once. At that point, I'm running completely on animalistic and demonic instinct, and neither me nor Kyuubi is in control. I try not to use the chakra unless absolutely necessary. I save it as my weapon of last resort and trump card. Usually, I only need a bit of chakra, not even a single tael, and it enhances my speed, strength, and senses to the extremes. I've also trained my senses considerably, continued Naruto. But more to the point, I've learned a few ninjutsu, clone techniques to be specific. I can use all 3 academy jutsu without seals, and all my clone jutsu can be done without seals as well. I know Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu, Doden Kage Bunshin, Futon Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Sarutobi stared, wide-eyed. I was also taught Bunshin Daibakua, which is used in conjunction with Kage Bunshin to make the clones explode with the force of a dozen or so explosive tags. My Nekken had me sign a summoning contract, but no, I'm not gonna tell you what it was, that's a surprise for later. I've also studied academics, politics, tactics, strategy, and history, and I've trained my chakra control to an extreme level. I have chakra reserves surpassing Kage level, and can maintain up to 1,000 shadow clones for several hours. I've also been taught both my Nekken and Itachi Nissan's preferred taijutsu styles. Sarutobi was staring, wide-eyed, mouth gaping, hardly believing what he was hearing. 2 years, and this is what Itachi and Mai had done to him. Even with his limited repertoire of techniques, if what he said was true, he could give Chunins a run for their money without the Kyuubi, and possibly even some Jonin. Add in the Kyuubi, and he could push people like Hitaki Kakashi and made a guy. Sarutobi closed his mouth and studied Naruto. Be that as it may, he said slowly. I think it would be best for you to return to the academy. Graduation exams are tomorrow. You should take some time to get used to being here. If you don't want to, then I'll see what I can do. That's fine, said Naruto. I was kind of hoping for that anyway. My Nekken and Itachi Nissan suggested I use that to get experience and make friends, then climb my way up the ranks. Yes, that seems like something they'd say, said Sarutobi. Itachi simply because it's the wise decision. And Mai because she's an absolute lunatic. He smiled. I'll contact Iruka and inform him that you'll be returning to the academy, in the same class you'd been attending when you left. You'll have to tell me all about your adventures at some point, but for now, you should probably get home, and yes, that apartment is still all yours, though probably more than a little dusty at this point. Naruto nodded and turned to leave. Oh, and Naruto, welcome home. You've been missed, more than you could ever know. Naruto seemed to freeze momentarily, then let out a foxy grin. That's good to hear, Ojii-san, he said. Oh, and something else. There's an easy solution to the paperwork problem. Sarutobi looked at Naruto, eagerness evident on his face. His eyes were pleading for the information. Naruto's grin widened. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With that, Naruto left. Sarutobi didn't move. He was frozen. No, it couldn't be that simple. But it was. Thunk. Naruto laughed as he heard the Hokage slam his head down on his own desk, and faintly heard his, Ojii-san, muttering, stupid, to himself repeatedly. Naruto replaced his straw hat and left the Hokage tower, for once feeling content with where his life was going. And, more importantly, feeling that his life was actually going somewhere. Settle down everyone, shouted Iruka using the big scary head jutsu. How he does that is still beyond the students, and even the Hokage hasn't figured it out. The class instantly settled down, much to the relief of Iruka and Mizuki. Now that everyone has calmed down, said Iruka, I'd like to first introduce you all to a fellow student who will be taking the graduation exam with you today. He's been absent most of this term since it seems a traveling shinobi decided to help tutor him to overcome difficulties he was having. A whisper ran through class, and Mizuki's jaw clenched imperceptibly. Come on in. The door of the classroom opened and everyone looked at the door eagerly, except for Uchiha Sasuke, Aburame Shino, and Nara Shikamaru, the first not caring, the second curious, but impassive, and the third simply looking over lazily, though all three already had a guess as to who it was. Through the door stepped a figure wearing a high-necked black cloak with golden nine-tailed fox decals on it, and a straw hat hiding his face. Everyone was now even more curious. Well, the Hokage said you'd changed your look, but damn, muttered Iruka. The figure reached up and tilted the straw hat up, revealing deep blue eyes set in a handsome face with 3 whisker-like scars on each cheek. Almost all the girls developed immediate hearts in their eyes. The boy finally removed his straw hat to reveal spiky golden hair that drew a gasp from almost everyone present, as the full view now available showed everyone just who it was. He gave them a foxy grin that had more than half the girls blushing. Uzumaki Naruto returns, he said. Anyone miss me? The class stared, most of them in simple blank shock. Despite the blushes, most of the girls were berating themselves for thinking Naruto was handsome. Hyuga Hinata, on the other hand, had turned completely red. Naruto, where have you been, man? Shouted Inuzuka Kiba. Similar shouts came from other students for a minute. Shut up, shouted Iruka, once more using the big scary head jutsu. The class quieted down. Alright, Naruto, why don't you take a seat next to Sasuke? If the girls are gonna be ogling the boys, it might as well be in the same direction. Every girl in class blushed at this statement while Naruto merely nodded and walked over to take the seat next to Sasuke. Just before Naruto put his straw hat back on, the girls got a good look at Naruto compared to Sasuke, and even the Uchiha's most loyal fangirls felt there was no comparison, mostly because of the light and warmth in Naruto's eyes, in comparison to the cold eyes of the Uchiha who, as he saw most of the girls ogling Naruto instead of him, started mentally dancing for joy. Alright class, come with me, called Iruka before leading the students outside to the target practice field. As some of you may already know, the Genin exam consists of a written test, tests for ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, a stealth test, and a target practice test. You must pass the written test, ninjutsu test, and at least 2 other tests to become Genin. We start with target practice. Aburame Shino. Most of the participants got an average score at about 10 out of 20 hits. Uchiha Sasuke got 17 out of 20. Uzumaki Naruto, called Iruka. Naruto stepped forward, his hands invisible within his sleeves. Most of the class was eagerly looking forward to finding out what Naruto could do. In the blink of an, Naruto's hands appeared, clutching shuriken, and the shuriken were immediately thrown, all at once, each one landing a bullseye on the head, torso, points where tendon cuts would be quite lethal, and one that had every male wincing slightly. The crotch. Nothing is below the belt in the shinobi world, said Naruto, quoting my Itachi had unconsciously covered his groin when Mai imparted this wisdom to Naruto. We're ninjas, not samurai. Iruka nodded in agreement, and marked Naruto 20 out of 20. Next was the genjutsu exam. This one could be voluntarily skipped, but that would result in a 0. The goal was first to dispel an opposing low-level genjutsu, and then place the teacher in a genjutsu. Each was worth up to 50 points, with more points received for dispelling quicker and making your own genjutsu last longer. Haruno Sakura performed the best, better than even Uchiha Sasuke. Then, it was once again Naruto's turn. Naruto immediately dispelled the genjutsu he was placed in, then turned his own genjutsu on Iruka. Unfortunately for the academy instructor, he didn't realize his genjutsu was broken and that he'd fallen into one for over 30 seconds. He quickly dispelled the genjutsu when he caught on and smiled as he shook his head. Naruto was, once again, given a perfect score. The next test, stealth, was considered the most difficult, with the highest performers being Naruto, with a third perfect, Aburame Shino, and Uchiha Sasuke. Then came taijutsu, one of the 3 Naruto was actually looking forward to. Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto, called Iruka. The 2 proceed into the ring, a few girls cheering on Sasuke while the rest remained conflicted. Hajime. Sasuke immediately charged forward, intent on ending the bout quickly. Naruto didn't budge an inch at first, and then, his fingers snapped out, grabbing Sasuke's wrist as he lashed out with a punch. Only a fool charges in blindly, Sasuke-san, said Naruto. He then pulled Sasuke in closer, throwing his free arm up in a horizontal block of Sasuke's body, and then pushed out with all his strength, sending Sasuke flying backwards. Sasuke stood up, glaring at Naruto, and then charged again. Rather than employ Itachi's style again, Naruto decided to act out, and dodged Sasuke's punch before slamming his fingers into Sasuke's neck, numbing his body from the neck down. The Uchiha collapsed as Naruto jumped back. This taijutsu style is a variant of the Jukin which attacks pressure points and nerve clusters to cause intense pain and numbness rather than actual damage, said Naruto. Once that's done, you can take the enemy at your leisure. Iruka nodded, impressed. Sasuke, though angry with the humiliation, was also impressed by the effectiveness of the style. He'd have to ask Naruto about it later. Next came the written test, which was laughably easy for Naruto with his year's worth of academics. Another perfect. The ninjutsu test was even more laughably easy, particularly as a good 3 months of training had been dedicated to chakra control, which was equivalent to several decades under the effects of shadow clone training. Naruto's control was good enough and he had used clone ninjutsu so many times that he could subconsciously mold the chakra necessary for any one of them. The same was true for the other 2 basic academy ninjutsu. This, of course, meant that he was damn near impossible to hit, since he could use Kawarimi no Jutsu on instinct to dodge almost any attack. Suffice to say that Naruto got the best score possible. Of course, he'd technically cheated, since he was severely overqualified for these tests. Well, what do we have here? Came a cold, calm voice. Mizuki trembled, clutching the forbidden scroll more tightly to his chest, looking around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. You know, I just had my Ototo return that scroll. I'd hate to see it taken away so soon, continued the voice. Especially by a pathetic traitor serving an equally pathetic snake. A figure appeared before Mizuki. One he recognized. No way, whispered Mizuki fearfully. Why you? Farewell, Mizuki, said Mai as her eyes turned blood red with black, 10-point double pentagrams. In the center of the pentagram was a small, slit pupil. Izanami. What the hell do you think happened to him? Asked the Anbu as he knelt down by the immobile form of Mizuki. I don't know, said Azuki Yugao, shaking her head. Whoever had stopped Mizuki's attempt to steal the forbidden scroll last night had done a serious number on him, as the man could no longer move or make sounds. He was obviously alive, but he might as well be dead. His body was rotting from the inside out, and no one could figure out how such a thing was possible. The only thing that was apparent was that it was painful. We'll take him back to Ibiki, said Yugao. Though, to be honest, I don't think there's anything he can do. You shouldn't have done that, said Itachi. Izanami is as dangerous to you as it is to the people you use it on. I'm touched by your concern, but you ignore me about your eyes all the time, said Mai. Anyways, it's the one method we have that is completely untraceable. Even Madara isn't aware of the exact effects, but everyone in Akatsuki knows about my Ryodan, and we can't let anyone know what we've done with Naruto. The 2 fell silent after that, their thoughts drifting to Madara. The man was responsible for destroying Itachi's life. He was the man ultimately responsible for the destruction of the Uchiha clan. The necessity of that slaughter came back to him. For Naruto, the boy the 2 had come to see as their younger brother, his family was destroyed by the actions of that masked madman. What had torn Mai's life apart was much more multifaceted. Her father was killed in the Kyuubi attack, and her mother was later murdered in front of her and her twin sister. As for Miu, Mai fully blamed herself for that one. Madara's role in destroying Mai's life was focused around her father's death and the Uchiha massacre. Aware of what was to come, Mai had chosen to follow Itachi regardless, though she would never admit it. He was the most important person she had left in the world. The 2 continued to walk along the path in silence. Their destination was an almost literal hole of criminals, packed with A-class Nukenin and even a few S-class. Their current mission for Akatsuki was simply to gather money. The hunt for the Biju and Jinchuriki, including Naruto, would be on hold for at least a few more months, probably at least another year. And the criminal pit they were headed to had plenty of good bounties to offer, and it was honest work, too. We're here, said Itachi a short while later as they stepped off the path and threw a minor genjutsu guarding the entrance down into the hideout. Itachi, let me handle this, said Mai, stepping forward. You don't particularly enjoy this, and it'll be nice to let loose a little. Mai, there's nothing to worry about, interrupted Mai, staring at Itachi with her Mangekyo Sharingan. 20,000 says these idiots can't even make me remove my hat. I am not taking that bet. Then we're in agreement, said Mai, smiling murderously as she pushed open the door. Letting out a small sigh, Naruto set his hat on the ground, removed his cloak to reveal a skin-tight black shirt beneath, and set the cloak on the ground as well. With that, the blonde created several dozen clones as he charged straight onto the water, then up the waterfall itself. Spinning around, Naruto raised his hands, and began a vicious spar with the shadow clones. He was so focused on his training that he didn't even notice the eyes watching him from various locations around the training ground. Are those clones solid? Questioned Ino. Why yes, stuttered Hinata. I heard about a Jonin technique that produces solid clones. Amazing, whispered Sakura as Naruto continued to spar with his clones. Wasn't he a dead last just 2 years ago? I heard he failed the Genin exams twice. And now look at him. Yeah, said Ino, sounding almost dreamy. Elsewhere, the year's Jonin instructors were also watching the blonde train. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, muttered Yuhi Kurenai. That kid can use a Jonin-level technique. According to Hokage-sama's report, that's only the tip of the iceberg, said Hitaki Kakashi. Apparently, whoever took him from the village 2 years ago focused on teaching him the basics and learning to use his head. Outside of the basics, though, he does know quite a few clone techniques. He is pretty impressive, said Sarutobi Asuma. Look at the way he fights. Isn't that the Hyuga Juken style? Similar, but not quite, said Kakashi. It's probably derived from the Juken. That style of combat was familiar to Kakashi. He knew there was someone outside of the Hyuga clan that used a Juken-based taijutsu style, but he couldn't remember who it was. Still elsewhere, alone, Genin observed Naruto's training. Interesting, Orochimaru-sama will want to hear about this. Itachi was a man with a strong stomach. At the age of 4, he witnessed the loss of countless lives in the Third Great Shinobi War. At the age of 7, he graduated the Konoha Ninja Academy at the top of his class. At the age of 8, he mastered his Sharingan. At the age of 10, he became a Chunin. At the age of 13, he became an Anbu captain, then slaughtered the entire Uchiha clan almost single-handed in one night. But even Itachi nearly hurled at the sight of the massacre his partner had unleashed. It could be difficulty to obtain the bounties with them in this condition, commented Itachi dryly, not bothering to conceal his discomfort. Mai, sitting in the midst of the slaughter, shrugged. Their condition isn't that bad, she said. Besides, I really needed to cut loose, you know how I get after using Izanami. And that is exactly why I felt you shouldn't have used it, said Itachi. Mai, it took the power of Shisui's Kodo Amatsukami and Miyu's Takamagahara to help you recover when you went too far. Even with what's protecting you now, the things you see are not meant for the eyes of humans. I know that, said Mai. I know, Itachi, but whatever sacrifice I have to make, if it means that we've succeeded in our goal, then it will be worth it. I hope you're right. So do I. After several hours of sparring, Naruto finally wrapped up his training. Before stepping off the water, he cupped a handful in his hands and splashed it over his face, sighing lightly as the water cooled his burning hot forehead and washed the sweat from his face and hair. Stepping onto solid ground, Naruto walked over to retrieve his cloak and hat before leaving the training grounds. That kid, Kakashi, could you have done that? Questioned Asuma, whistling lightly. The Cycloptine Jonin shook his head. No, he admitted. Naruto had done more than just walk on the waterfall while sparring with shadow clones. He'd created additional shadow clones, and both the real Naruto and the clones were throwing out the occasional jutsu. Most shinobi would have been exhausted within an hour, maybe 2 if they had particularly large reserves. In fact, I know of only one ninja who could pull that off, but, well, she died a long time ago. It took a lot of effort on Kakashi's part not to dwell on the fate of Uzumaki Kushina. As the Jonin left, the 3 newly graduated genin who'd been watching Naruto started talking amongst themselves. Did you see that? Who knew Naruto was this awesome? Said Ino, smiling without restraint. He was fighting on a waterfall, said Sakura. How did he do that? It's a standard chakra control exercise, said Hinata. Both Uchiha fangirls immediately turned their attention to the shy Hyuga heiress, who blushed brightly. My father taught it to me to help with the Juken. Sakura and Ino stared at each other. If it was a standard exercise, how come they never learned it before? Sharing a nod, they simultaneously grabbed hold of Hinata, who squealed in surprise. Hinata, please teach us how to do that, they said in unison. A week later, after the graduation exam, the time for team assignments had arrived. By this point, rumors had spread regarding a certain missing Chunin, and many in the class were talking about it when Iruka walked in. Seeing the gossiping students, he sighed and took a deep breath. Shut up, shouted Iruka, instantly quieting down the class. With that done, Iruka cleared his throat. Now, I'm sure you're all curious about the rumors regarding Mizuki. I can neither confirm nor deny any of them. That said, I'd like to extend my congratulations to all of you for graduating. As of today, you're all real ninja, but that's only the beginning. You're ninja of the lowest rank, genin, and even among genin, you are only low-level rookies at the moment. Some of you have found the trials of this academy difficult, but once you experience the real world, you'll understand that these are challenges that true ninja could do in their sleep. And one day, as long as you remember the basics learned at this academy and the warning I've given today, you'll also become true shinobi. As most of the students stared at Iruka with some level of confusion, Naruto suppressed a snort at the truth in his first sensei's words. He knew the first few weeks would be dull D-rank missions. Itachi and Mai had spent months drilling patience into the overly thick skulls of every shadow clone he could produce, but his patience was already wearing thin. Either the two weren't as good at it as everyone thought, or Naruto's skull was thicker than they'd realized, which even Naruto could admit was probably the case, given how much he'd relied on the shadow clone training for academic studies. Team 7 will be Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura and Aburame Shino, said Iruka, snapping Naruto out of his reminiscence as he realized that he hadn't been paying attention to Iruka's announcements, for which he berated himself. Then, Iruka's words sunk in, and the blonde hid a slight smile at the knowledge that he was on a team with at least one of his crushes, as well as one of the few people who'd somewhat acknowledged him when he was younger. Meanwhile, Shino was silent in the face of Iruka's words, while Sakura shifted slightly, evidently uncertain how to react. Team 8 will be Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata and Yamanaka Ino, continued Iruka. There was a groan from Ino over not being on a team with Sasuke. Team 9 will be Akita Kahori, Ishimura Jiro and Hirata Mana. Team 10 will be Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru and Uchiha Sasuke. You're all free to go now, but be back no later than noon to meet your senseis. That is all. Good luck. Sounds of chairs scraping against the floor filled the room as the genin stood up and began gravitating towards their teammates before they left. Rather than stand up, Naruto continued to sit, taking slow, deep breaths, relaxing himself after his frustration over not paying attention. Naruto, came a soft voice suddenly. Naruto let out a final deep breath and, smiling, turned to face his pink-haired teammate. Yes, Sakura-san. Sakura-san, questioned Sakura curiously. Naruto flashed his old goofy grin at her as he stood up and pushed his straw hat off his head. It was obvious she was recalling the time when he used a different honorific. I thought it would be rude to refer to you so childishly, said Naruto, glancing around to see Shino walking towards them. Uzumaki-san, Haruno-san, said the Aburame with a slight nod. Good morning Shino-san, said Sakura politely, smiling at the bug user as Naruto returned his nod. Shino-san, can I ask a favor of you? Said Naruto. Sakura looked at Naruto curiously, while Shino raised an eyebrow almost imperceptibly behind his sunglasses. I know your reputation, and I remember from 2 years ago. I don't mean to sound rude, but could you try to be a little friendly, I guess you could say. I don't want things to be all professional. Shino nodded in understanding. I understand, Uzumaki-san, he said. I'll try. You can start by simply calling me Naruto, replied the blonde, grinning slightly as the three started to walk out of the classroom. None of this, Uzumaki-san, business. Shino nodded again. Of course, Naruto-san, he said. The same for me, all right, said Sakura, leaning forward slightly into Shino's sight with a smile. Yes, Sakura-san. Well, I guess it's something, said Naruto mildly as they stepped outside and sat down in the shade of a tree. Naruto pulled out 3 bentos, surprising his teammates as he handed one to each of them. Though caught off guard, they accepted nonetheless. After a few moments of silence in which Sakura subtly watched Naruto, the Rosette decided to speak up. What happened to you? She asked softly. Naruto and Shino paused, turning to look at Sakura, both knowing who she was directing the question to. Even though so many people hated you, you were like the light of this village. A goofy, happy-go-lucky kid, who was more wonderful than any of us would admit. That's all gone now, but you still seem happier. What could have happened in 2 years to do that to a person? Naruto was silent for a moment before letting out a small sigh. People change, Sakura-san, he said. The truth is, I just acted happy to conceal how I really felt. I was alone, and unhappy. 2 years away allowed me to finally go somewhere with my life, rather than being stuck in the rut of pain and depression I'd been stuck in. And now, I think I just might be able to finally find that true happiness that's eluded me for so long. His teammates were silent, listening intently to what was being said. On this occasion, Naruto didn't hide any of what he was feeling, and the truth of his words was evident in the emotions that filled his voice. Sakura turned slightly to face him, unable to hide her wonder at the changes in the young boy, while Shino managed to remain passive. Naruto shook his head. Well, one really shouldn't live in the past, said Naruto brightly. To be perfectly honest, that's why I've never been able to stand Sasuke. What do you mean? Questioned Sakura, confused. Uchiha Sasuke still thinks of the loss of his clan, answered Shino. Naruto nodded. That's his real motivation, said the blonde as he continued to eat. He wants to avenge the Uchiha clan. I can't exactly blame him for it, but revenge and hatred just breeds more vengeance and hatred. It's stupid, frankly. Well, I guess, said Sakura uncertainly. She couldn't argue with Naruto's logic, but she'd been chasing Sasuke for so long, it was hard to go against him in any way. If I were to wallow in that sort of thing, I'd have reason to destroy this entire village, said Naruto quietly, catching his companions by surprise, neither of them ever realizing how bad things had really been for Naruto. But, I swore an oath to myself to protect this village. And I'll never go back on my word. At the tower of the Hokage, the Sandaime leaned back from observing the genin with his viewing orb, and looked to the Jonin for their opinion. You're right, he is different, said Asuma, the Sandaime's son. They'd only observed Naruto's training, and hadn't observed much of his personality, yet. You said that he got a perfect score on every test without any apparent effort. Not that any of them were surprised after seeing him train. That is what Iruka's report said, agreed Hiruzen. Given what little he told me when he returned, I can't say I'm surprised. How will the villagers react to this though? Questioned Kurenai. I know that everyone has displayed different attitudes, but are we sure no one's going to give us trouble? We'll deal with that when the time comes, said Hiruzen, turning his attention to Konoha's top Jonin. Kakashi. He's intriguing, if nothing else, said Kakashi, stepping forward and eyeing the image in the crystal ball more closely as Naruto started ate lunch and talked with his teammates. And you said he's now aware of the Kyuubi? Hiruzen nodded. That's correct, he said. I've spoken with the council. It seems they were hoping you'd take charge of Uchiha Sasuke. However, I've decided it would be best for you to choose which you wish to teach, the 7th graduate squad or the 10th. It's your decision, Kakashi. Kakashi was silent in response to that. A part of him really wanted to train Sasuke. After all, he owed a great deal to Obito, a deceased relative of Sasuke and Kakashi's closest friend in his youth despite the frequent conflict between them. But ultimately, Kakashi felt he owed Naruto and the boy's father far more than he owed Obito. Besides, he'd made mistakes in his past regarding Naruto. It was past time he tried to make up for some of them. I don't care what anyone has to say, said Kakashi. I will take the 7th graduate squad. After lunch, Team 7 returned to the classroom to wait for their sensei. As others filed back in, Naruto stood up and approached Team 10 to challenge Shikamaru to a game of shogi, which was promptly accepted by the lazy genius. Sakura could not deny that she was amazed, as was everyone else watching. The Naruto she'd once known was good at thinking on his feet, and very impulsive. The blonde playing shogi with Shikamaru now, however, most definitely was not. He was calm, cool, and calculating, but in a way distinctly different from Sasuke's angst that made him undeniably attractive. Try as she might to deny it, Sakura couldn't help but feel like she was quickly developing a crush on the handsome blonde. It probably didn't help that she found the pink fox on his cloak somewhat flattering. The game of shogi also amazed Choji. The Akamichi found himself bewildered to see that Naruto was not only matching Shikamaru, but also actually pushing the Nara genius back at times. The game also served as a tribute to the tremendous patience Naruto had built up, as it took an average of 5 to 10 minutes for each player to take his turn, and it wasn't exactly uncommon to see one or both of them take even longer than that. This quickly drew the attention of others in the class as well. Naruto, since when have you been any good at shogi? Asked Kiba, voicing the question that was on everyone's minds, with the exception of Shikamaru, who was focusing on the game. In response to the question, Naruto shrugged slightly as he watched Shikamaru intently. One of the activities I had to pursue while I was away was sharpening my mind, said Naruto, motioning to the board slightly. Shogi was excellent not only for that particular task, but also for teaching me patience. Being impatient and rushing into things is a surefire way to get yourself and your teammates killed. At that moment, Shikamaru made his move, taking one of Naruto's silver generals with his knight. Naruto, who'd already considered that particular move, quickly responded by sending his rook charging forward recklessly, only to stop just outside the range of Shikamaru's remaining gold general, putting in a position to take several of the Nara's pieces. Of course, being able to think quickly is also important on a real battlefield, when your enemies aren't gonna sit around while you form strategies. I'll keep that in mind, said Shikamaru, considering the changes on the board. Several hours later, Team 7 was the only one left waiting for their sensei, and had been that way for over an hour. When Sarutobi Asuma came in to pick up Team 10, Naruto and Shikamaru had somewhat reluctantly ended the game in a draw. Now, as they waited for their apparently tardy sensei, Sakura turned her thoughts to the game of shogi that had been played. While Naruto and Shino didn't seem to particularly mind the wait, Sakura lacked the patience of her teammates, and was starting to get restless. The game of shogi had gone a whole lot of nowhere. Sometimes, Shikamaru would push back against Naruto's forces, and sometimes it was Naruto doing the pushing, but the ultimate result was that the field was still even, and the game could have easily gone to either of them when it ended. Whenever one of them made a mistake, the other would promptly punish them for it. Shikamaru took his moves a little faster than Naruto most of the time, but Naruto still matched the Nara's brilliance, and sometimes made lightning-quick and foolish moves to catch his opponent off guard, buying time to form additional strategies of his own. While it had been fascinating to watch, it also grew rather repetitive after a while, and the Rosette's thoughts soon turned away from thinking of the game that had been played. "Where is our sensei?" moaned Sakura. "He's late. I thought ninja were supposed to always be on time. He might be testing our patience, Sakura-san," said Naruto calmly. "I guess." A few minutes later, the door of the classroom slid open. All three members of Team 7 turned to face the door as a head of silver hair was poked through, a single eye looking over them lazily, his other eye covered by his pulled-down hideout and the lower half of his face covered by a mask of black cloth. Murmured the Cycloptine Jonin. It was difficult to get a reasonable first impression with this group. Sorry to be late. He chuckled weakly. Well, I got a little lost. Anyways, meet me on the roof. With that, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Suddenly, Naruto started chuckling, drawing the attention of his two teammates. Naruto-kun, it's nothing, he said, shaking his head and standing up as he put his straw hat back on. I just never thought we'd have the copy nin as our teacher. Copy nin? Asked Sakura. Shino, however, had heard of the Sharingan wielder, and understood what Naruto was talking about. The bug user was intrigued. He'd expected the copy nin to be assigned to teach the Uchiha, though he supposed he should have realized his team had received Kakashi when it was Sarutobi Asuma who picked up Team 10. Standing up, Sakura and Shino followed Naruto up to the roof, where their sensei was waiting for them. Ah, you're here, said Kakashi. Oh, and may I say that your current attire is much more appropriate than when I last saw you a few years ago. Kakashi smiled while Naruto smirked. Well, anything's better than being a big orange bull's eye, right? Kakashi chuckled as the genin sat down in front of him. Alright then, if we're going to be a team, I think it's best that we introduce ourselves, said Kakashi. Well, what do you want to know? Asked Naruto. Oh, simple stuff really, he said. Likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future. Why don't you go first, sensei? Said Sakura. Oh, me? Well, my name is Hitaki Kakashi, he said. I have no desire to tell you my likes and dislikes, dreams for the future, and I have a lot of hobbies. So, all he told us, is his name, muttered Sakura. Alright, let's start with you on the left, said Kakashi, pointing to Sakura. Me? Well, started Sakura. My name is Haruno Sakura. My likes are, I guess books. My dislikes, Ino Pig and this big forehead of mine. Here, Naruto muttered that he thought her forehead was cute, but only Kakashi heard him. I never really thought about any reasonable dreams for the future. Well, I suppose we'll leave it at that, said Kakashi. Next. My name is Aburame Shino, said the bug user. My likes are bugs. My primary dislikes would be noise and killing bugs. My hobbies are collecting bugs and studying the techniques of my clan. I have no real dream beyond becoming a good leader for my clan and protector of this village. Fair enough, said Kakashi with a slight smile as Sakura repressed a shudder. She never could get used to Shino and his bugs, but she'd have to, now that she was on a team with him. And last will be you on the right. Naruto grinned lightly. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, he said. My likes are ramen, books and bunshin jutsu. This surprised all three of the blonde's companions, since he'd been such a blockhead only 2 years ago. My dislikes, people who can't let go of the past and people who hate others without reason, for things outside their control. Kakashi nodded, thinking of the Kyuubi. As for hobbies, well, I train and study a lot, but recreationally, I'd probably have to say pranks. As for my dream, Naruto smiled, adjusting his hideout. I want to become Hokage and protect the people of this village from whatever may try to harm them. Kakashi's visible eye widened in surprise, but his surprise soon melted into a broad smile, though it was hidden beneath his mask. That's an ambitious sort of dream, he said. But with your attitude, well, maybe you'll surprise us. Now then, I'd like you all to meet me at Training Ground 7 for survival training. Sensei, why survival training? Asked Sakura. We've done plenty of that in the academy. Naruto couldn't help but suppress a snort. Sakura-san, while I was out, I learned a lot, said Naruto. Remember what Iruka-sensei said? The trials of the academy are things that true ninja could do in their sleep. That's right, said Kakashi. Becoming a ninja has several steps. The first is learning the most basic of the basics at the academy. Once you've passed the academy graduation exam, you are tested in what I like to think of as the true graduation exam. What? Gasped Sakura as Naruto and Shino remained silent and impassive. By passing the academy test, you've proven that you grasp the most basic of shinobi skills, explained Kakashi. Now, we'll be testing them under more realistic conditions. The survival exercise has a failure rate of 66%, meaning no more than 9, maybe 12, of the genin who graduated will pass, and perhaps not even that many. Those who fail will either go back to the academy, or be removed from the shinobi program entirely. Sakura froze at this, completely caught off guard as her teammates calmly nodded in understanding. So, be up bright and early for the exam, 7 o'clock sharp, said Kakashi. I'll be your opponent. Bring all your gear. Oh, and I advise you not to eat breakfast. You might throw up. With that, Kakashi vanished. Throw up, muttered Naruto. Come on, if we had stomachs that weak, we'd have no right to be ninja. Naruto stood up, looking at the other two as they also stood, Shino impassive and Sakura nervous. Well, it wasn't an order, anyways. Might as well have something to eat. Better to have as much energy as we can, especially if Kakashi-sensei is really going to be our opponent in the exam. Agreed, Naruto-san, said Shino. Yeah, I guess you're right, said Sakura, her nervousness melting when Naruto looked at her with concern ever so slightly tinting his eyes. Sakura felt herself nearly melt when those gorgeous, shining sapphire blue eyes locked with her own eyes, only one thought going through her mind. It should be illegal to have eyes that beautiful. I'm home, called Sakura, stepping through the door of her house. Welcome home, Sakura, replied her mother, Haruno Yuko, smiling at her daughter as she stepped out of the kitchen. How did team assignments go? Pretty good, actually, said Sakura, smiling lightly. I'm on a team with Aburame Shino and Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto, huh, whispered Yuko with a slight frown. Guilt flashed briefly through her mind, but she quickly dispelled it. No need to get Sakura involved in that subject. That's good then. He's a wonderful person. Sakura was silent, watching her mom as she returned to the kitchen. There had been a time, only 2 years ago, when Yuko had hated Naruto with a passion just like everybody else in the village, and had warned Sakura away from him even before he became a prankster. A part of her had always wondered why. It couldn't be that her mom had known what a loser he'd become. First of all, he only started behaving the way he had because of how he was treated. Sakura had realized that much. Second, Naruto was now the strongest of the rookie genin, surpassing everyone, even Sasuke, on all fronts. Even discarding his abilities, he was quite a catch as far as eye candy went. Silently, she marveled how 2 years of absence had changed people's opinions of the blonde. And, what about your sensei? Asked Yuko as Sakura stepped into the kitchen and sat down at the table. We got Hitaki Kakashi, said Sakura. I don't know much about him, but Naruto called him the copy ninja, and it seems that he's supposed to be really strong. The next morning, 3 12-year-old genin approached Training Ground 7 from different directions, each wide awake, alert and ready. They arrived precisely on time, even though they knew their sensei would likely be 2 or 3 hours later. This was not without reason, though, in fact, they'd agreed that it would provide them with a good chance to discuss what they were up against. Morning Naruto-kun, Shino-san, said Sakura. Good morning, Sakura-san, Shino-san, replied Naruto. Shino merely nodded in response as the three sat down under the shade of a tree. I brought along some bentos to tide us over while we wait. With a Jonin opponent, we're going to need all the energy we can get. All right, but nothing that'll make me fat, said Sakura. Naruto chuckled. Sakura-san, dieting is for fangirls, not kunoichi, he said sternly. Unless you're slacking off or eating nothing but fattening foods, the only weight you'll put on is muscle, which is a good thing. Naruto winced slightly, thinking of the heavy blows delivered by a certain S-class kunoichi criminal, but quickly shook it off. Anyways, you said Kakashi-sensei would be late today as well, said Sakura, changing the subject. But to come on time so we could discuss what we know of him. So, since I wasn't helping, what did you two find out? After Kakashi had left them on the roof of the academy yesterday, Naruto had suggested they do a little scouting, and Shino had immediately agreed. Information was a shinobi's greatest weapon, ignorance their greatest weakness. Therefore, they had to learn all they could about Kakashi before their exam. Sakura had admitted to a lack of any notable skills outside the academic area, something that had shamed her, but Naruto had reassured her that it would be fine as long as they could pass the test. With all that out of the way, Naruto created several shadow clones, onto which Shino placed his Kikaichu insects. The clones transported the insects in pursuit of Kakashi. When they found him, the shadow clones would conceal themselves and continue to tail them, while the Kikai attached to his clothes in various areas. Later that night, the Kikai returned to Shino while the shadow clones dispelled themselves. Naruto then sent new clones to tell his teammates to arrive on time, giving them plenty of time to discuss strategy. Kakashi-san is an interesting one, said Shino, refusing to refer to him as their sensei until they'd passed the test. Judging from what was overheard, he is perpetually late to everything, which is why we arrived on time rather than early. He is also a strong believer in teamwork, which it seems is connected to a friend who died when he failed on that account. Naruto nodded, impressed that Shino had gotten that piece of information. His shadow clones hadn't been able to get close enough, though he had observed a few other things. He does have one notable weakness we can probably exploit, said Naruto. He's a pervert. What? You heard me, Sakura-san, said Naruto as the rosette started to seethe. He's a lazy pervert who goes around almost everywhere reading a book from the Ika Paradise series. Why that no good? Calm down, Sakura-san, said Shino. I'm sure Naruto-san has come up with a method of turning this against Kakashi-san. Several, actually, said Naruto. I also went to Hokage-sama. He wouldn't tell me much, as was to be expected, but I convinced him to lend me this. With that, Naruto produced a copy of the first volume of Ika Paradise, a special edition copy, and author signed, no less. It's a gift he was planning to give to Kakashi-sensei. I'm sure he'll be very displeased to see what we might do to his precious book to be. Sakura and Shino blinked. Then blinked again. Then blinked a third time. Naruto-kun, that's brilliant, cried Sakura, jumping on Naruto and squeezing him into a tight hug. Naruto gasped for breath. Damn, that girl had strong arms when she really wanted to. Sakura-san, you may want to release Naruto-san, said Shino dryly a moment later. I don't think he can breathe. Huh, oh, sorry, Naruto-kun, said Sakura, letting go of the blonde and bowing to him. It's fine, said Naruto, waving it off mildly. However, internally, despite the near suffocation, he was dancing for joy. Sakura had hugged him. We'll need more than that to defeat a Jonin, commented Shino. Anything else up your sleeve? I always have something, usually several dozen somethings, up my sleeve, answered Naruto with an almost feral grin. First, I can provide us with whatever weapon we need. Because of my large chakra reserves, I can produce literally thousands of shadow clones without exhausting myself. Those shadow clones can then become any tool we need them to be. They can also distract Kakashi-sensei, providing us additional time to formulate strategies. That's a good idea, said Sakura thoughtfully. Okay, we're limited in what we can do without knowing what test we'll be facing, but we can go ahead and get ourselves set up. Naruto, how long can you maintain your shadow clones for? It depends on how many I create, said Naruto. The fewer I make, the longer they can be maintained. But I can maintain as many as 1,000 for several hours, though they only take 1 or 2 hits before they pop. That should be fine, said Sakura, nodding. Alright, so, here's my setup plan. Yo, you're late. Hey, sorry, said Kakashi. I got lost on the road of life. Cut the bullcrap, Kakashi-sensei. I've already figured out that you're going to be late for everything, said Naruto, lazily staring up at the clouds in a manner reminiscent of a certain lazy Nara genius. Oh, then why were you here early? Asked Kakashi, raising a hidden eyebrow. Because I get a better view of the clouds here than at my apartment. Well, in that case, said Kakashi, putting the timer he was carrying down on one of the log posts, along with 2 bento boxes. His eye narrowed suspiciously when he heard the distinct lack of grumbling stomachs. I thought I said not to eat. Sakura shrugged. It wasn't an order, she said. It also occurred to us that if you're our opponent in the exam, we'd need all the energy we could, added Shino. Also, I brought along a little extra to account for the weight, said Naruto, pointing to 3 empty bento boxes sitting on a rock next to the base of a tree as he pulled himself up. Kakashi stared at the rock for a moment, confused. He didn't remember it being there, but he shook it off. He probably just never bothered to notice it. It wasn't like he'd memorized every aspect of this training ground. Well, I have to say, that was a good decision on your part, said Kakashi, setting the timer for noon. Then, he held up 2 bells. Now then, here's the test. I'm going to tie these 2 bells to my belt. Your goal is to take one from me. When the timer goes off, anyone without a bell gets tied to a post, and must then watch as I eat their lunch right in front of them. The 3 shared a quick glance that didn't go unnoticed by the Jonin. You only need to get 1 bell, but anyone who doesn't have a bell fails by default. In other words, at least one of you is going to fail no matter what you do. The eyes of all 3 genin narrowed ever so slightly. You can use whatever tools you want, continued Kakashi. You won't succeed unless you come at me with the intent to kill. Not so sure about that, said Naruto, grinning. I've sparred with tougher opponents than you. Oh, then let's see you prove it, said Kakashi, tying the bells to his belt. Is everyone ready? When he received 3 confirming nods, he continued. Begin. In the next instant, all 3 genin disappeared. Kakashi blinked. There was no way all 3 of them were that fast, was there? There's something wrong with this whole test, said Sakura after Naruto informed her of what his shadow clones had gathered. Agreed, said Shino. I've never heard of anything but 3-man teams of genin. Never a 2-man team, and one wouldn't even be a team. Yeah, said Naruto. And remember what Kakashi-sensei said yesterday. He specifically stated that only 9 or 12 candidates would pass. In other words, they have to pass or fail as a team. So the bells must be to make us turn on one another, said Sakura in sudden understanding. Of course, muttered Naruto. There's no way an average genin could get the bell on their own. 2 genin couldn't either. It would take all 3 to get it, unless one of them was particularly exceptional. Sasuke or I could probably get the bell on our own, but it would be difficult. The problem is that we're the exception, not the rule. Given what we know about Kakashi-sensei, this isn't a test of ability, but a test of teamwork. So it's a good thing we set up like we did, said Sakura. Naruto nodded. Kakashi's engaging one of the clones, he said, receiving information from one of the many clones he'd scattered and disguised all over the training ground. Alright, he'll almost certainly drag this out to the bitter end. The clone is Sakura's, so it's using the basic academy taijutsu, no offense. None taken. Anyways, he's pulled out his Ika Paradise book, continued Naruto. This'll be our chance. We need to think quickly, before Kakashi-sensei catches onto our little game. Kakashi sighed as Naruto emerged and came at him, allowing Sakura to retreat. His eyes narrowed as Naruto threw his punches recklessly, switching from the precision grace of his Juken-based taijutsu to the reckless brawling of a street fighter. What was he up to? Naruto lashed out with a kick that Kakashi easily dodged, seeming to vanish as he appeared behind Naruto. A shinobi isn't supposed to get caught from behind, idiot, said Kakashi, not hiding his disappointment in the least as he formed the tiger seal. Senin Garashi. With that, Kakashi jabbed his fingers forward, but in the next instant, an explosion knocked him back before he'd even made contact with Naruto, sending Kakashi flying across the training grounds. What was that? Thought Kakashi, bouncing to his feet, only to realize that he was restrained by several Narutos hanging onto him. He's using Kage Bunshin. In front of Kakashi stood his 3 students, all looking distinctly smug. Suddenly, in a puff of smoke, Shino and Sakura transformed into Naruto, and Kakashi's eye narrowed. Where are the others? He asked casually. The Naruto in the middle smirked. Oh, we figured I'd be enough, so they're off enjoying themselves, he said casually. We'll figure out the bell thing later. Kakashi's eye narrowed further at the obvious lie, Naruto was taunting him. As Naruto charged in, he delivered another punch with that brawling Street Fighter style, only for Kakashi to transform into a clone that promptly disappeared. However, as the explosive tags Kakashi dropped went off, Naruto continued to smirk. Hidden in the trees, Kakashi let out another disappointed sigh. Naruto was clearly overconfident. But that confidence wasn't entirely misplaced. Kakashi replaced his book in his kunai pouch, deciding it was time to take this a little more seriously. It seems like I've been dealing with Naruto ever since I told them to begin, he said. I think I'll go find Sakura. With that, the silver-haired Jonin vanished. Phase 1 complete, said Naruto, locking eyes with the other 2 as he placed the book he'd been casually looking over as he waded into his kunai pouch. Now for Phase 2. Got it, said Sakura, running out of the hidden clearing. Naruto looked at his last teammate and the 2 shared a nod before leaving themselves, in a different direction from Sakura. About 15 minutes later, a scream split the air, and a certain pink-haired kunoichi fainted, collapsing spread-eagled on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Maybe I overdid it, thought Kakashi, staring at Sakura's unconscious form after being victimized by genjutsu. Oh well, no harm done in the long run. Kakashi leapt backwards through the trees and set off to find Aburame Shino. It didn't take him long. Shino was standing in a clearing, hands in the pockets of his overcoat, calmly waiting for Kakashi. The silver-haired Jonin chuckled slightly. Compared to the others, you're a strange one, he said mirthfully. Since I doubt you've ever fought an Aburame, said Shino, raising his arms as Kikai insects swarmed out from them. I doubt you've ever faced an opponent quite like me. With that, Shino threw several shuriken Kakashi's way, accompanied by several more which were clearly composed of the Kikai swarming from his sleeves. Kakashi evaded, but the Kikai suddenly turned, back on course with Kakashi. The Jonin's eye narrowed as he used Kawarimi no Jutsu to escape. Shino, evidently, anticipated where he'd move to, though, and was already surging towards Kakashi, moving with surprising speed and grace. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed as he began to piece together the truth of the matter. Team 7 outclassed all of the other genin teams this year. Naruto, of course, had easily outclassed all of the other genin, and from the reports, he hadn't even been trying. Shino, on the other hand, performed well, but was nothing that really stood out. However, Kakashi now realized that he was probably stronger than Sasuke, which would make him the second best of his year. Shino understood the importance of deception to the shinobi. This made Sakura the weak link in the group, but even though her only strength was book smarts, she had a lot of potential and room to grow. Actually, I find myself really hoping they will pass, thought Kakashi as he continued to trade blows with Shino, occasionally evading the Kikai insects, which he knew were extraordinarily dangerous. Shino threw a punch, which Kakashi evaded, then dropped down low, aiming to kick Kakashi's feet out from under him. Kakashi leapt up into the air. That was when Shino struck, his hands lashing out towards the bells, along with the Kikaichu. Kakashi's eyes widened. Damn it, this kid was better than he'd thought. Again, Kakashi transformed into a log as he used the substitution technique to make his getaway. Behind his glasses, Shino's eyes darted about, trying to find the Jonin. Below, cried Kakashi's voice as a hand gripped Shino's legs. Before he could react, the bug user was pulled down and buried to his neck. Doden, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, said Kakashi, kneeling in front of Shino with a smirk that was evident even beneath his mask. Well, you're not half bad. Too bad that's still bad enough. Kakashi laughed lightly at the horrible line as he walked away. When he was out of sight, Shino smirked before breaking down into a swarm of Kikaichu that promptly returned to the host. Everything is in place, said Shino as the Kikaichu landed on his fingers. Sakura shivered, watching those bugs slip into his clothes, knowing they were living throughout his body. At least he had the courtesy to keep it relatively hidden. Alright, then I guess it's time for Phase 3, said Naruto, standing up and heading back to the clearing where it all began. Ah, Naruto, said Kakashi mildly when the blonde appeared, just as he was about to pull his book back out to continue reading. Are you really going for the bells this time, rather than sending your clones after me? Yeah, I figured it was time I took this seriously as well, said Naruto. Kakashi nodded as Naruto slipped into that Juken style. He'd have to ask Naruto what the name for it was, later. Suddenly, Naruto shot forward, so fast Kakashi barely raised his guard in time. What the hell? Was this Naruto's true speed? Kakashi ducked under one strike, then retaliated with a punch of his own, but Naruto twisted out of the way. Kakashi's eye narrowed. He'd have to take this a touch more seriously himself. Kakashi leapt back, hands running through seals with blinding speed, ending on the tiger seal. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. At that instant, Kakashi spat a giant fireball Naruto's way, engulfing the cloaked genin in flame. Kakashi landed, worried that he might have actually hit the boy. But when the fireball cleared, there was nothing. Gokaku no Jutsu. You are taking this seriously. Came Naruto's voice. Kakashi ducked, just as Naruto delivered a strike where the Jonin's neck had been an instant earlier. Was that a shadow clone I hit? No, I'm certain it wasn't. He must have used Kawarimi no Jutsu to escape. This taijutsu style, his speed, his escape, the number of clones he produced and the fine chakra control for that training I observed, there's no doubt about it. Naruto is at least a chunin in terms of abilities. He's incredible. Kakashi continued to dodge Naruto's strikes to the best of his abilities, but it was proving more difficult than he'd expected. He deflected one or two blows, and his eye widened at the sheer force behind them. It's not just speed, but strength too, and he's only 12 years old. Who the hell could have turned this boy from a dead last into this in only 2 years? Bringing his speed up another level, Kakashi dodged one blow, then lashed out with a kick that Naruto couldn't block or dodge. But when the blow connected, Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. A shadow clone. Then I've really been fighting nothing but clones this whole time. Kakashi landed on his feet near the pond, one hand rising almost instinctively to his hideout. Was Naruto really going to make him use that? At that moment, dozens of Narutos exploded from all around Kakashi, charging him all at once. Oh fuck that. When they reached Kakashi, the Jonin made a quick getaway with Kawarimi no Jutsu, leaving a few dozen explosive tags attached to the log, wiping out all of the shadow clones. Kakashi reappeared next to the posts, and it was then that an odd thought occurred to him. He glanced over at the timer to see that it was still more than 2 hours from going off. But he knew they'd been at it for at least 2 hours. He chuckled. Very clever, he said. You broke the timer. Actually, sensei, said a soft voice next to Kakashi's ear as he suddenly felt a lot of added weight and a kunai pressed to his neck. We replaced it with a shadow clone. Before Kakashi could react, he felt his chakra drain away rapidly, and nearly collapsed to the ground at the sudden loss. Kikaichu swarmed off of Kakashi's body and onto the body of Aburame Shino as the bug user and both his teammates stepped into Kakashi's view. Each of them was holding a jingling bell. Kakashi chuckled as the Naruto on his back vanished in a puff of smoke, along with the timer, the rock on which the eaten bentos had been placed, several animals in the area, and a broken tree branch here and there. So, care to tell me what happened and where the extra bell came from? He said, checking his belt to confirm what he already knew. The bells were gone. The extra bell was my doing, said Naruto. I sent a shadow clone off to buy one that would be indistinguishable from the ones you had. Clever, but the ones I had are very old. That's why we beat all three of them up a little more, and wore the new one down using jutsu, said Sakura, smiling as she jingled her bell slightly. So what's to stop me from failing all three of you for this bit of treachery? Deceit is part of the art of the shinobi, Kakashi-sensei, said Shino, confident that they'd passed. Never underestimate your opponent, no matter how small they may seem. Naruto-san and I scouted out information on you yesterday, and we used that to our advantage here, coming early to discuss strategy as we waited for you. You've been caught in a giant illusion from the moment you stepped onto the field, added Naruto. When you got here, we'd already left and found a place to hide in the little forest we've got here. Meanwhile, I left behind 3 shadow clones, 2 of which used Henge no Jutsu to disguise themselves as Sakura-san and Shino-san. Sakura nodded. Naruto-kun also left a bunch of other shadow clones scattered about the training ground under various disguises, from rocks to animals, she said, picking up Naruto's explanation. While you gave your explanation to the clones, Naruto already had you surrounded, and Shino-san had littered the field with his bugs. When your explanation was given, the 3 shadow clones hid themselves, while another disguised in the tree dispelled itself, telling Naruto-san what the test was, said Shino, continuing for Sakura. This allowed us to discuss the test without you being aware we were communicating at all. We also realized that there weren't any 2-man teams, said Sakura. And you said yesterday that only 9 or 12 genin would be passing, in other words, 3 or 4 teams of 3 people each, meaning we had to pass or fail as a team. After that, we devised our plan of attack, said Naruto. Once we'd decided what to do, I created another shadow clone, then dispelled it. Since the new clone was aware of our strategies and the other clones weren't, this allowed me to instantly inform our army of what was going on. After that, they launched their attack, said Shino. The goal, however, was not to get the bells, but rather, to drop the Kikaichu I'd left with the clones onto your body while you were distracted with fending off Naruto-san. Along with the Kikaichu, a shadow clone that was disguised as one hid on your back. When you dealt with the first wave, we continued on to the next phase, said Sakura. When you tried to put me in a genjutsu, you actually got a clone that was disguised as me and was apparently a pretty good actor. Once you let your guard down, I put my own minor genjutsu on you to disguise the sound of the real bells and create an illusionary sound in its place. I was watching you from then on, making sure the false noises were made at the appropriate time. While Sakura-san was luring you away, Naruto-san and I dealt with the alarm in case it took longer than expected and put the final phases of our plan into motion, continued Shino. I created a Kikai Bunshin to confront you and place several Kikaichu on the bells. Then, Naruto-san confronted you once we had confirmation that all the pieces were in place. Those weren't shadow clones, Kakashi-sensei, said the blonde in question. That was the real deal, but whenever a blow threatened to hit me, I used Kawarimi no Jutsu to switch places with one of the clones. Your arrival by the pond was the cue for my clones to attack en masse. While you were by the pond, Shino-san's bugs cut the bells loose, said Sakura. My chakra reserves are low, so I was able to get close without being noticed. Naruto-kun taught me Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu while we were waiting for you, since I didn't have any solid clone techniques. I just created one next to you while you were focused on the clones, had it grab the bells, and toss them to the other side, where I was waiting. To finish our grand illusion, the Kikaichu on your body drained your chakra while the shadow clone moved in for the kill, said Shino. And that about sums it all up, said Naruto, smirking. Kakashi was gobsmacked. He'd just been completely outwitted by a bunch of wet behind the ears genin. No, outwitted didn't even scratch the surface. He'd underestimated them, and badly, and now, he'd been effectively humiliated. And not only had they devised this enormous illusion into which he'd been trapped, but Sakura had learned to perform Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu in less than 2 hours. Oh, right, I forgot one more thing. Kakashi turned almost uncertainly to the blonde, only to see him holding up a suspiciously familiar orange book. Kakashi blanched and reached into his kunai pack, pulling out his copy of Ika Ika Paradise. But an instant later, that copy disappeared in a puff of smoke. When the clones were putting Kikaichu on you, I had one disguise itself as your book and swap places with it using Kawarimi no Jutsu, said Naruto, grinning almost maniacally. Now, you can either pass us, or I'll destroy the book, along with that special, author-signed first edition the Sandaime was planning to give you. Kakashi blanched even more visibly before sagging. All right, he said. Congratulations. You all pass. The Jonin sighed as his book was tossed back to him. Then, he chuckled. You know, I think you're the first people to ever see through this test, said Kakashi, scratching his chin thoughtfully. It was first employed by the Shodaime and Nadaime Hokage to test a team of new genin. That team consisted of the Sandaime Hokage to be and his 2 advisors. Sandaime-sama then used it to test the students who would become known as the Densetsu no Sanin. Jiraiya-sama would later use it to test his own students, who included Namikaze Minato, the greatest hero in Konoha's history. Before he became the Yondaime Hokage, Minato sensei was assigned a team that he tested in the same way, mine. Kakashi sighed, straightening up. But no team ever saw through the entire test from the start, he said. I believe Minato sensei probably figured it out, but that was partway through the test, too late to salvage the situation, and it was a mistake he never made again. I can see a bright future for all 3 of you. Kakashi then walked past them, motioning them to follow as he stepped up to the memorial stone. He kneeled down before it, placing a hand gently on the stone. Look at this, he said. The numerous names carved on this stone. These are ninjas who are recognized as heroes of this village, ones who gave their lives in the line of duty. It's a memorial, my best friend, my teammate, and my sensei. All their names are carved on here. Kakashi straightened and turned to his students. I want you to remember that. I once made the mistake of placing my duties over my comrades. That is how my best friend died. I realized what a stupid idiot I was too late, and because of that mistake, he died saving my life. Kakashi's hand continued to rest on the memorial. I want you to remember this lesson, above and beyond all others, because it is the road that all ninja of Konohagakure no Sato should follow, a road of true power, the road that is the will of fire. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum, said Kakashi. But, those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. I learned that lesson the day my friend died, and it is in understanding that lesson that I have truly grasped what it means to be a ninja of this village. I want you all to remember that. Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei, said Naruto, conviction thick in his voice. I swear to you, I won't forget. I won't either, said Sakura. I too shall remember this lesson, said Shino. Good, said Kakashi. Then meet on the bridge near the entrance to the training grounds tomorrow. We'll start missions then, and afterwards, we'll focus on your training. The Sandaime raised an eyebrow in surprise when Kakashi appeared in his office shortly after noon. The only other occupants of the room were Asuma and Kurenai, who'd passed their teams and were waiting to see who else passed. All the other Jonin had failed their own teams. "You're early, Kakashi," said Hiruzen. "What? Did you decide to skip the makeup test?" "Actually, I'm here to report that Team 7 has passed with flying colors," said Kakashi, smiling. The others all stared at him incredulously. "What? You actually passed a team?" said Asuma, sounding like he didn't believe it. He turned to Kurenai. "Alright, this is a very convincing genjutsu, but you can drop it now." "It's not a genjutsu," said Kurenai, sounding annoyed. "Let me put it another way," said Kakashi with a small sigh. "I will be extremely proud to say that I got to teach Aburame Shino, Haruno Sakura and Uzumaki Naruto. They never got to the second phase of the test. They completed crushed and steamrolled over the first test. They weren't fooled for a minute. Right from the off, they recognized the true purpose of the test, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. As far as the official results go, these three are the smartest genin in their year, and after seeing what they're capable of, I will gladly vouch for the authenticity of that statement." "Really?" said Hiruzen with a raised brow. "Care to tell me what, exactly, they did?" "Simple," said Kakashi. "They trapped me in a grand and inescapable illusion, based on a critical and usually warranted mistake. I underestimated them, badly. They scouted information on me after the introduction yesterday. I'm sure you're aware of that. They knew I'd arrive late, but they still arrived at the appointed time, taking advantage of my absence to strategize. When I reached the training grounds, I found all three of them waiting. As it turned out, I actually found 3 shadow clones, 2 of them disguised, keeping their actual location a secret from me right from the start. So, Naruto truly has learned to take full advantage of Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, muttered the Sandame. Continue, Kakashi. Well, to keep a long story short, I spent almost the entire test facing clones, said Kakashi. I didn't see the real Naruto until he confronted me at the end of the test, and even then, he was simply pushing me to where Sakura was waiting to grab the bells that were cut free by Shino's Kikaichu. Earlier, when I thought I'd placed Sakura in a genjutsu, it turned out to be a clone, and instead, she used a minor genjutsu on me, silencing the real bells and creating a false sound in their place so I wouldn't notice when the bells were taken from me. And when it all came to an end, I found myself with the kunai of a shadow clone at my throat, a large portion of my chakra drained by the Kikaichu that had been dropped all over me, and all 3 of the real students standing in front of me, each holding an identical bell. In my book. While Asuma and Kurenai stared at Kakashi, still incredulous, Hiruzen finally released the laughter that had been building. In other words, said Hiruzen, still chuckling, you were privately humiliated by a bunch of wet behind the ears genin. Yes, that about sums it up. You've gotta be kidding, said Asuma, rubbing his temples. My team barely passed, and that was thanks to Shikamaru and Choji. I would have failed the Uchiha if it hadn't meant failing those 2 as well. The kid might have some hope, but his cocky attitude is maddening. Same here, said Kurenai. Kiba and Ino are both extremely brash, and Hinata doesn't have the confidence to do well without help. They only passed because both of them wanted to help Hinata. Hokage-sama, I thought we were trying to keep the teams balanced. When you consider Naruto, it becomes difficult to balance the teams, said the Hokage with all seriousness. When I was deciding on the teams, I considered the importance of balance, but soon realized that a lot of clan heirs were in the same general area. Shikamaru and Choji were near the bottom of the class, Sasuke and Shino were near the top, and Kiba, Hinata and Ino were about mid-level. After some consideration, I reorganized the original team somewhat, foregoing balance for what I felt would work best. First, I knew that I would have to keep Sasuke away from a team with any girl other than Hinata. Second, I had to consider the senseis. Finally, I had to determine who would be able to work well together. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair slightly, chewing on the end of his pipe absent-mindedly. Following the first condition, a natural choice would be to put Sasuke on a team with Kiba and Hinata. And that would have worked, until you considered the second condition. A sensei that could meet their needs would not be able to meet Sasuke's, and vice versa. Discarding that, another possibility, in the quest of maintaining balance, would be to put Sasuke on a team with Shikamaru and Kiba, and put them under Kakashi's guidance. However, it was also important to watch the balance of the remaining teams. And you eventually reached this conclusion, said Asuma, nodding as he now understood his father's reasons. Hiruzen sighed, and gave a small nod. It does unbalance the teams, he admitted. Although Sasuke's overall score was greater than Shino's, I think we all understand which is the stronger ninja, and Naruto is easily far stronger, while Sakura was about the middle of the class, strong in academics, moderate in genjutsu and ninja tools, and weak in ninjutsu and taijutsu. However, even if we were to put Naruto on a team with the lowest scorers, the results would be the same, if less obvious. I see, said Kurenai. She shook her head. Things are going to get interesting, aren't they? Yes, said Hiruzen, grinning slightly. Things in the village of the Hidden Leaf are going to get very, very interesting, now that the Yondaime's legacy has returned. So, Naruto-kun, you've spent the last 2 years training? Asked Sakura as the genin of Team 7 sat down at Ichiraku Ramen Bar, though Naruto had had a little difficulty convincing Sakura to indulge him. That's right, said Naruto. 1 bowl of shoyu ramen with extra vegetables, please. Coming right up, said Tyuki cheerfully. And how about you two? I'll have shio ramen please, said Sakura. The same as Sakura-san, added Shino. Not a problem. So, what did you learn? Said Sakura, continuing her earlier question. Hinata, Ino and I saw you training the day after graduation. That's weird, you'd think I'd have noticed that, said Naruto mildly. Well, for the most part, I was simply worked to death in chakra control exercises and academics. My sensei used an extremely potent training method revolving around Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. What sort of training? Asked Sakura, curious to know how shadow clones could have been that helpful in Naruto's training. Remember how I used them for scouting yesterday and had them dispel themselves to quickly spread information? Sakura and Shino's eyes widened as both almost immediately grasped the implications. So you could have each clone study something different, and then it's like you're studying a whole bunch of things at once. Gasped Sakura as the ramen was put in front of the 3 genin. Exactly, said Naruto, breaking apart a pair of chopsticks. Itadakimasu. With that the 3 started eating. Sakura had heard rumors about Naruto's eating habits 2 years earlier from Iruka, so she was actually rather pleased to discover that Naruto ate rather politely. How come nobody else uses this training method? Asked Sakura, pausing for a moment. Naruto also paused and gave a slight shrug. The truth is, most people can't, he said. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is very draining on one's chakra reserves. I've always had very large reserves from a young age, though, so it's easy for me. I actually had an easier time with the higher level clone techniques than with the basic Bunshin no Jutsu because the basic Academy ninjutsu use almost no chakra at all. The larger your reserves, the harder it is to control your chakra, the more difficult jutsu become. In return, though, you can generally perform many more jutsu than normal people. I see, said Sakura. It's a shame Shino-san and I can't train that way. Says who? Replied Naruto softly, drawing the attention of both his teammates. If we bring your reserves up to the point that you can produce shadow clones, you can use this training method. Maybe not as effectively as I can, but it would nevertheless speed your training up to at least twice the normal rate. Not only that, but the more you use shadow clones, the quicker your chakra reserves will grow, since merely producing them serves as a sort of training for your reserves. Furthermore, the younger you are, the less developed your chakra coils are, meaning the more strain and push you put on them from a young age, the more they'll grow. Eventually, chakra development will nearly flatline, but when you're young, it can grow very quickly, and if you keep at it, it'll be longer before the development degrades. You sure? Of course, Sakura-san, said Naruto, finishing up his ramen. Because of the shadow clones, I got at least 80 years worth of academic studies done. 80 years? Naruto chuckled, and even stoic Shino seemed amazed. I can produce and maintain 1,000 or more clones each day for over several hours, explained Naruto. Depending on what the clones are doing, sometimes even longer. That's amazing, said Sakura. Naruto smiled slightly. Well, if Kakashi-sensei agrees and you two get your reserves up enough to handle it, I'll teach you Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, said Naruto as he put some money on the counter, covering the cost of ramen for all three of them. Thank you for the meal, Tsuki-san, Ayame-san. With that, Naruto stood up to leave. You're welcome, Naruto-kun, said Ayame, smiling sweetly. Come back anytime. Naruto nodded and smiled while Sakura and Shino finished up thanked the Ichirakus for the meal themselves. I shall return home now, said Shino. Goodbye, Naruto-san, Sakura-san. I'll see you tomorrow. See you. With that, Shino left. Well, I'm gonna get in a bit more training and studying, said Naruto, walking towards the training ground he'd been using over the last week. Naruto-kun. Naruto paused, looking back at the uncertain Rosette. Yes, Sakura-san. Sakura blushed lightly, fidgeting somewhat uncomfortably. Can I come with you? Sakura felt her blush growing, but if Naruto noticed, he didn't say anything. Instead, the blonde simply smiled that brilliant smile of his as he gave a slight nod, and Sakura's blush deepened further. Of course, Sakura-san.